Hi everyone, Besarat Hashem. You're listening to another edition of Kosher 2.0. And today we're going to be talking about a topic that could be very much life-changing for a lot of people because it deals with something that we all struggle with on a day-to-day basis, and that is our thinking process. Now, if you're listening to this broadcast and you happen to be Jewish, you know that this is a concept that we're constantly hearing about. And in fact, I think it was maybe 2 years ago or 3 years ago, there was this big movement about positive thinking and all these, there was these little boat tours about, they had these lectures about positive thinking, and many people were jumping on the bandwagon. But there are certain things that go along with positive thinking that really will take just, saying things and transforming them into things that you really do believe, that you believe with your whole heart and soul, and that you start to emanate that out and project that out into your day-to-day life. In fact, it's brought down in Proverbs chapter 23, verse 7, as a man thinketh in his heart, so he is, because your thoughts become words, and your words become actions, and your actions become habits, and your habits become your legacy. Before you know it, you have the whole sum of your life right there in front of you in the course of the way you have thought about the world. So we're going to get into this today, and I hope you'll join me to what I hope will be a very informative talk about positive thinking. All right, everyone. So thanks for tuning in. Thank you, Borei Olam, for giving me the zechus to teach this, which really is an extension to a video that I had done. And I'll put this up on YouTube. And if you're happen to watching on YouTube, I'm going to link the channel below. And I did a very surface video on water and the fact that water has memory. And we kind of touched on this. And it really was projecting the fact that the water in your body actually has memory. It's a very interesting thing, which has been scientifically proven. And I kind of went into the fact of what your words say. And today we're going to kind of go into kind of what your thoughts, how they affect everything that's going on, not only to the water that's inside your body, but also the vibration that it sends out as a result of what's going on, which again has been scientifically proven to happen. And we hear people who work out, we hear this concept of muscle memory, but cells happen to have cellular memory, and they kind of like doing the same thing over and over and over again. And your brain, which is obviously, it's the computer, right? It runs everything in the body. It is, probably one of the most complex things perhaps ever created that we know of. And it runs what I like to call these programs, all the time on a subconscious level. And so imagine the water, which contains this memory, is very much like the program. And the brain is running this. Your brain also is primarily made up of water. And so imagine that it's running these programs all day long. And these programs really do shape and define how you behave, how you interact with people, a lot of things, even down to if you will become ill, lo aleinu, with some kind of illness. So now if the brain is running these programs all day long, one would ask, where does the brain get these programs? And it is believed by scientists that 95% of these programs come from your life from the first 7 years. So I want people to really understand, especially if you have kids right now, because this could be a very defining moment in the way you're raising your kids, in that it will make you more conscious as to what you are showing them all the time. So now during the first 7 years of a child's life, if you were to put an electroencephalogram, which records the electrical activity in the brain, you would see that the child's brain registers as they're vibrating at what's called the theta level, which is very much where the imagination stems from, right? And that's not so hard to. This is why, children, they're always pretending, and for them it looks very real, and they're able to have these conversations with imaginary friends because they're very much vibrating. Their brain is at this level. It's functioning at this level. What most people do not know is that this level is also a very hypnotic level. So in fact, when we're talking about the subconscious thoughts that we play in our mind, believe it or not, the majority, again, 95% is coming from this first 7 years. And you don't have to sit down and train your kid. They pick it up by watching their environment. That's all that it takes. So now, given that all that it takes is for a child to actually be observing the environment, and so in essence, we're talking about, if we're on the phone or the phone rings and we tell our spouse or someone in the house, I'm not here. Guess what we've just taught our child, right? And if we are very negative, or we talk about people behind people's backs, or whatever it may be, or even if it's even positive, right? If we're taking them to shul all the time, if we are having this very, kind lifestyle, we're very charitable, all these things are being written into the subconscious program of a person within the first 7 years. So now let's think about this for a moment, because for some people, this is really going to be a light bulb moment as to their negative midot, or their negative behavior. And they can really start to really pinpoint a time where these things were coming into their life. And as you can imagine, the older you get, so you're talking, from the first 7 years, and even to myself, who's like in my 40s, this is a long time program that's been running. Whatever negative traits that have been running, this has been a long time in the making. So if we were right now to go back and just really go back to that time, what does your childhood look like? Is there a good family dynamic? Are you supported? What are your friends like? Did you have good, friends? Were you bullied? Was your family struggling for money? Were they religious? Were they kind? Were they positive? Were you put down? Was everything, if they, how did they handle conflict? I think in particular is a place where many of us get tripped up, right? If there's a crisis in the family, what did we observe them doing? Were they shutting down? Were they pretending like, nothing affected them? And, all of these things truly shape the way we view the world and how we interact in it. So now on one hand, we have these programs which we've, kind of identified where they're coming in from. So we're going to put that to the side for a second, because that program still needs, a shidduch, if you will, a partner to kind of pair together in order to become a reality and start manifesting in the physical world. So what ends up happening, a thought will get generated, and from just the power of the mind generating a thought, it creates an electrical pulse, and that pulse has a vibrational frequency that will actually attract to other vibrational frequencies, or like in quantum physics, how they like to say energy. So it will start to search out other electronic pulses that are vibrating at the same frequency. So for example, if you are somebody who's always fearful and worried, it will start to attract other things that are vibrating at that same level. So for instance, illness can be something that is vibrating at that level. And the problem becomes that when a thought starts to attract other, negative energies, there's a great potential for this to become your reality. And this is how you're creating conscious moments in the physical world. And the same is true on the flip side. Happy people will generate more happy encounters in their life. Spiritual people will intend, people who are on a path, if they're on the derek to looking for, the truth of the Torah, you ever, like anyone who's gone through this, myself included, like you're going into a subject and all of a sudden everything starts coming to you that has to do with that subject. This is because you are attracting this back into your life based on this vibrational pulse that's going out from you, this source of energy. And this is something that's happening all the time, not just between, people and people. It could be people to animals, it could be people to nature. But we're having this exchange of energy between people all the time, yet it's not something that I think we can articulate because of the fact that what's the word for that, right? Like, I love your energy. When I see you, I love your energy. But what does this look like, this exchange of people? And I'm going to give you a few examples. For instance, people who have animals, if you've been gone all day from work and you come back and the animal sees you, the dog or the cat, whatever it is, sees you, gets all happy, and, they start wagging their tail and they're so excited to see you and you become excited to see them. And yet there's been no words exchanged, but there's been a lot of energy that is being exchanged between the two of you. And that energy starts to elevate your mood. And based on that, the brain now starts to, equate, dog and cat or puppy or kitten equals happiness, right? It equals joy. This is the feeling that we'll have. And the same is true if you've had a negative encounter with an animal. All of a sudden, the brain, will connect and it will start to make a pathway which says animal equals danger, animal equals fear. Now, where we start to get a little bit more serious, and we're going to use an example. Many of us have known someone who perhaps gets into these bad relationships, and they could be any kind of relationships. But for this example, I'm going to use relationships, dating relationships. And let's say someone is continually picking, the wrong kind of person, and there, I think we all know someone, right? Because there's always that saying, she knows how to pick them or he knows how to pick them. And every single one after the other, this is where they coined the phrase, she's got a real winner there. And I think that the person, like no one, I think in their conscious mind, right? I hope no one consciously goes out and says, yes, I would like to get a guy who treats me really rotten, who speaks down to me, who really, belittles me. And then they'll find, sometimes they'll get a boyfriend like that, and then they end up with a boss like that, and they end up with friends like this. And this is happening even though the person is not looking for it. And in fact, they can, say that they're going through great lengths not to find someone like this. But nevertheless, they will find themselves back in this, what seems to be an unbreakable pattern. And the reason is because there is some kind of program that has come in. So that vibration keeps going out and it keeps attracting the same kind of people. And so by default, we seem to have mastered this negative energy. So logic would dictate that the opposite would be true, right? We should be able to master this positive energy. This is why we go through so many positive thinking workshops. And if you're Jewish, we constantly hear the Rebbeim saying, think good and it'll be good. But for so many people, this concept, although they are desperately, with all of their might, trying as hard as they can to see this positive thinking to fruition, for a lot of people, it tends to fail. And the reason for this is something you may not have ever heard. And the reason is because the emotions that are attached to your thoughts are what's creating this reality. So let me break down how this works, okay? So you have a thought. Now, for many of us, we're going to start off with the negative thought, right? That we've mastered so well. We have a thought in our mind, right? Now, the mind will go through your program and it will search out for a similar experience, right? Because it needs to process this information that it's getting. So now it will take, for many of us, the worst case scenario, and suddenly we start to feel this emotion, which really starts to create the environment that starts to support that, right? Because we're sending out this vibrational signal. So now all of a sudden, it just seems like, there's a cloud over that person and everything seems to be going wrong. And it's because we're constantly reinforcing that one negative thought with a past occurrence. And then at that point, we're sending out more and more because we've attracted something goes wrong. And we say, see, of course, everything goes wrong for me. Everything, and so it's like a loop. We keep continuously looping this idea and the vibration, and it comes back, and we loop it and it goes out and it comes back. And this can go on, for many people forever. And, there's a saying, wherever a man wants to go, Shemaim will say amen, right? So wherever we're putting our thoughts, again, like it says in Koheles, wherever a man thinketh, that's where he is. So if you're in this negative place and you keep doing this, guess what? We will show you the derech to all the things that go wrong in life. It's not worth me trying this, business venture, because, it never works out before. And it's almost like we start to self-sabotage as well. Even subconsciously, we self-sabotage ourselves. We have something good and we'll sabotage it, right? Or if you get a cold and suddenly it becomes like the worst case scenario and you're going to get sick again and your idea is not going to work because people rejected me. So I'm just going to stay quiet. And for many people, this goes on, robbing their life because they're so afraid at this point. And a lot of this has stemmed, again, from the first 7 years. So now if you were to ask me, the brain being the computer, the memory, the cellular memory being the programs, this would very much be like a virus, this continual loop that keeps just going on and on and on. And believe it or not, it's funny because the brain will do what you tell it, but because we have this subconscious program, that's what we're telling it to do all the time. And there's one thing about the brain, even though it'll do what you tell it, it doesn't like doing anything new, right? So this is where the hard work really starts to come in. So what's the fix for this, right? Because the brain does like the status quo. It does like status quo. It has made all these pathways, believe it or not, people who've had strokes will probably connect with this more if they've gone through the kind of training where they've had to learn how to do things from the opposite side. So for instance, for many of you that know, like if you saw the stroke, if you saw my share, the stroke of midnight, which Bli Netter, I will also post into, if you're on YouTube, I'll post it onto that as well, where I had to learn, I had gone through a series of, mini strokes, and I had to learn how to do things with the opposite just to build those new pathways. And thankfully, I regained strength in both sides. But the brain had to make new pathways. And at first, it was very difficult to do. But like everything else, repetition is the key here because it takes about 21 days to form that new habit. And that's because the brain is building that new pathway, which at first it vehemently wants to reject. It does not like to do anything new, right? It's like, it really is. It's, the brain is amazing. It really is amazing. It's fascinating in all the things it can do. But it's also surprising all the things it doesn't want to do, So now it's funny because you ever notice how you study something, and for myself, all the things I studied in the Torah, how later on in life they come back and they seem to have such wisdom, but they seem to take on wisdom in a way you didn't anticipate them from before. So there was this verse that came out in Parkei Avot in 117, and it says that all my days I've been raised among the sages, and I found nothing better for the body than silence. And ironically, I really at this point see this verse in a different way, because ironically enough, one of the keys to breaking this repetitive loop is by being silent in order to allow yourself to consciously observe the subconscious. Okay? So that almost sounds like an oxymoron, but it does work. And the way we do this is that we do get into a state of silence. And that means not, information is not just that you're speaking, but we're taking in, noise through what we're hearing, what we're seeing, everything that's going around us. If you close your eyes and somebody walked in, you can feel that energy. So this is also a form of noise. So what you want to do is you want to get into a place, and this cannot be like a once a week thing. It really has to be, you have to carve out time every day, especially if you're struggling with a very destructive loop. You have to get the time to be silent. And in that time, you're going to notice that, your thoughts are going to be going all over the place. Start to notice them. Try to pick, if you were to try to pick, like first of all, whenever we daven, I think this is the perfect example. Whenever we daven and all of a sudden we start thinking 10,000 things, this is the same thing that happens. But part of what I want you to observe is what you're telling yourself, right? And you're going to start to notice that there are some negative statements that are coming out in your thoughts about a person, about yourself, about a situation. And this is what you need to identify and isolate. Okay. Now, this is going to require practice. This is not something that will happen the first time, the second time. I mean, you've had years of playing this loop. It is not going to happen overnight. But when those thoughts start to, wander off, you have to redirect them back and identify them so that at that point, you can start to isolate and exchange them for new information that has to be stored now into the cellular memory. So now let's give an example. So let's say, you're applying for a new job. You have an interview scheduled. And then all of a sudden you notice that you're panicking and, thoughts start to rush into your head. What if I don't get this job? What if this, what if that, and sometimes they're valid and sometimes they're not valid, information that we're feeding into our mind. So what needs to happen at this point? Okay. So you've isolated. Okay. I've already said like 10 negative things about why I'm not going to get this job. And I've never even stepped into the office, right? Sound familiar? So what ends up happening at this point is that because that thought needs to connect to an emotion, what you need to do is you need to visualize yourself in the interview, that it's going well, that it's successful, that you're getting a call or they're shaking your hand if you're a guy to guy, or if you're a woman, or whatever it is, that you're accepting this offer, that is a good offer, and you need to connect with the emotion of the happiness of it. Really visualize all of what you would do. If you would call your mom or your dad and say, look, I just got this job, you need to visualize all of this and let that emotion, which will now find another happy emotion, attach and build from there. And this can be applied to anything, whether you're going out and you're looking for a shidduch, to become married. Don't sabotage the match before you even gone out with the person. Visualize that it's going positively. Visualize all the good that can come out of a situation. Do not focus on the negative, because the negative will only bring back more negative. So that's one thing. So now the other pitfall that I find, and and I got to tell you, once I got this, right, once Hashem like just knocked me on the head with this, it really did change my life. And that is that I think people get too heavily invested in a particular outcome, right? And this probably requires the most discipline of all, because, you know, a lot of times we have a particular outcome in our head about any given situation, about how we think it should go. And sometimes it's contrary to Hashem's plan, right? So this may be arguably the number one reason why people step off the derek with Hashem. You know, this excessive dwelling on an outcome before or after something, you know, they thought before it should have gone this way and it happened to have gone that way. And then they excessively dwell on, you know, why didn't it go this? And, you know, if everything is coming to Hashem, why couldn't you have just done this for me this one time? Or you have an excessive, like, it has to happen within this time. You know, I have to be married by this time. If not, all is lost. I have to have a child by this time. All is lost. I have to have my business running by this time. All is lost, right? And these potential pitfalls that keep playing on that loop, they really don't need, you know, we don't need to give any more help to it. Because remember, the brain doesn't like doing anything new. And for many of us, this kind of behavior of looping this negative thinking is so comfortable for the brain. So then it starts to build up almost this animosity towards Hashem. You know, why did he allow this to happen? Why didn't he just, you know, why didn't he make it come out the way I wanted it to come out, right? I think that is probably the biggest pitfall of all. And it really does cause a lot of people to come off the derek with Hashem. Now, an even greater sign of growth is when you now have to take this outcome, which was contrary to the one that you had invested in, you know, and had hoped for. Now it becomes an issue of judging this negative experience favorably, and finding the good in it, which is not so easy. For instance, you know, all of this really, I had to really get everything that I'm telling you today, really after I had gone through an extremely difficult work situation. And I had really invested in the idea that because I daven, you know, first thing in the morning, because I do, you know, tzedakah and charity and I'm sniud and all this, that somehow, some way, everything is going to go my way. Everything, the sun is always going to shine. You know, nothing challenging is ever going to happen to me. And not that there wouldn't be challenges, but not challenges that were so difficult, because I invested in my mind that, you know, I live in this bubble, right? And that, you know, we become with this mentality that we're kind of untouchable. And of course, you know, in this generation, this concept is not anything new. So now if you look at our ancestors, they've also had to come through some pretty amazing challenges. You know, and I think the difference here is that no one is physically chasing us. No one, for the most part, is looking to throw us in jail or take our lives, has v'shalom, barring any anti-Semitism. But by and far, for the most part, no one is chasing us. And in fact, the only thing that has become our greatest enemy is that which exists in our mind. Okay, so whereas our ancestors had physical challenges that for sure could have, I mean, they could have easily, you know, said, you know, all is lost, blah, blah, blah. But they didn't. The fact that they continued on believing in Hashem and going through things, you know, that is the bigger testament here. So for like many of us, if our business, you know, we didn't make as much as we thought, or, you know, we still haven't gotten married, somehow we are ready to pack it up and that's it. We're done. Has v'shalom, like we're done. Forget Yiddishkeit, forget the Torah, forget all these things. Has v'shalom. We take on this mentality because we're invested in an outcome that was contrary to that which Hashem had in mind. So finding peace with these outcomes really becomes the great challenge at this point. But, above all, you have to have compassion on yourself and on others, because this is not a phenomenon that is exclusive to us. This really is happening to everyone, everywhere. Oftentimes we're so ready to focus in on the negative of another person. And again, here we go back to this electrical pulse that goes out and attaches to energy. You ever hear the Rabbanim say, if you're upset with somebody or somebody really gets under your skin, it's because they're reflecting something of yourself? Like, this is the proof of that, that there is this energy that came out and it attracted something to you. So, we have, especially when we're going back in our thoughts, for many people who will be going back now into their thoughts and really trying to pinpoint what was the first time I heard whatever it was, or I experienced whatever it was that set up this program for my brain to keep running. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that people who, has v'shalom, were just beyond depraved with you in their behavior, or something serious. We're talking, everything has an exception, and we're not talking about that. We're talking about the majority of people and the majority of their experiences. We're talking about going into this arena, and anything outside of that really needs to be, those experiences need to be analyzed very closely and carefully, and preferably with a Rav who, not just any Rav, with a Rav who understands how to help someone back out who's been through some kind of abuse or trauma in their life, whether it be, it could have been, a horrendous accident, or it could have been an experience with a spouse or a parent, or just, a random person out in the world. But those things, they need a little bit more analysis. So, everything in its context. But the bottom line is, anyone who hasn't been from birth, maybe, and if you're of a certain age, let me just put that out there, right? If you're a certain age, there used to be this song from Kenny Rogers, you got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them. And that's back to what we were saying. You have to know, when is it time to not invest any more in the outcome you had hoped for, right? Stop wasting energy on things. It's like trying to put squares into circles. It's not going to happen, Habibi. Move on. Move on. And you will find that life will be just that much more happier, because you're not wasting energy and going into this destructive loop, not only with yourself, with others, and with Hashem, and destroying your life and your relationships over an outcome that you want to see happen. It's like, I want this to happen, and I don't care if the whole world falls by the wayside. And you really, have to examine this position. But again, all of this takes time. It is something that has to be done over and over and over again. You didn't get here overnight. You didn't get here in a week. You didn't even get here in a year. For many of us, it's been many years, sometimes decades. So this takes time, but nevertheless, it is possible. And for many people, they do start to see breakthroughs very quickly in this area, because they're so conscious. So when something happens, even if they can't articulate, they understand that they feel something going on the inside. And a lot of times people are able to stay silent in order to process that information and try to connect, why did I have this kind of reaction? So now in closing, I want to remind everyone, if you have children in that 7-year stage, please be cognizant of what you're exposing them to, the people, the atmosphere, the words, the ambiance of what you are creating in your home is leaving an impression on your child, right? So if they're past that point of the 7 year, all is not lost. Remember that repetition is the key to, changing this around. But the number one thing you should have in your arsenal is the fact that Hashem is always in control. And by crying out to him, this will also generate, again, you're crying out and Hashem will start to put people in your life and teachers into your life who, can teach you these things. And who knows, perhaps for many people who have been crying this, cry to Hashem about their children, perhaps this year is one of those things that Hashem is bringing to your attention to learn from. And this is how we grow. It is through our mistakes that we grow. And if you're already at a point in your life where you're like myself, an adult, and beyond that point, even into senior, it's never too late. Not even if you're senior, it's never too late. It's never too late to do a cheshbon of your own midot and of your own mistakes. And I think at the end of the day, that is what Hashem, he's hoping that we get it. If not, he has to keep knocking us on the head. So I pray that would not be the case, that we would, it would just click for us. But, these things can be traumatic and they can spark up anxiety. And part of, we talked about the mental and emotional side of it. But, there are things that we can do to support the body. And this wouldn't be Kosher 2.0 if I didn't, point those out. And, of course, as always with everything, always be sure that you are consulting your physician or your naturopath physician. Everything that I say as far as, anything on Kosher 2.0, it is just information for you to have. You have to make an informed decision, and you need to do your own research as to what's best for you and your family, and whatever works best, But some of the things that I like to do, especially just to help my body physically deal, because it's one thing we're talking about, all the things of your programs, and now on top of that, we have to go live our life. So again, part of what helps to slow that information down, right? So it doesn't seem like everything is rushing at you and you're getting overwhelmed. And there's some herbs and supplements that are really great in this area, and I happen to like, kava. Kava, and I get it in a tea, and I like to take this like maybe an hour before bed along with valerian 15 minutes before bed, or right before you start saying Kriyat Shema, because that'll take about the time. And these are really great because they help the nervous system just to calm down, and it helps your mind really to start processing all the information that has come to you, whether today or any other time. And you'll start to notice that during the day in your waking hours, you won't be so reactive to these stressful situations. And also what's great during the daytimes, you want to start taking some adaptogens. Now, adaptogens are great because they help the body respond to stress. Ashwagandha is a great one. Ginseng's a great one. Gotu kola is one of the, it's a very good superstar, especially for the brain. And in fact, the Doctrine of Signatures, if you know what that is, and again, I also did a share on that one, and who knows, maybe there'll be a few videos to be, look at the bottom. I'm going to try to post as many as I can. But the Doctrine of Signatures is generally whatever the shape of that fruit or the vegetable, it tends to indicate what it's coming to cure. And the, or I shouldn't even say cure, help, right? What it's coming to help. And so a Gotu kola, if you look at it, it looks very much like the brain and the stem. So it's very interesting. But it's been shown to be very beneficial for people. Tulsi is another one that I really, really like. Tulsi is great. Hawthorn is, I also like, when you're dealing with stress, I also like those herbs that kind of deal, like hawthorn is really known for the heart. But because the heart can, it almost feels like we have this physical sensation from the heart. I like to also nourish that area as well of the nefesh, and to really get some support in for all of the energy to flow properly through the brain and the heart connection. Bach flower remedies. I cannot say any more. First of all, I also this almost sounds like I'm going through everything in the Kosher 2.0 series. There was also a series I did on this one, a tremendous doctor who really understood that there is an emotional component to illness, and he discovered these wonderful remedies, and they have been so instrumental to so many people, and they help you with a whole bevy of emotional things and behaviors. If you have aggression, if you've heard trauma, a lot of these things, these are just wonderful things to have in your arsenal. They can be quite pricey. They're about $18-19 per bottle. They are well worth it. So it's something, maybe you can invest in little by little. But Rescue Remedy seems to be, it really seems to help a whole number. So if you were going to start out with one, that would be the one I would recommend for you. But these are some of the of my favorite things to use. But as always, again, if you followed Kosher 2.0, you know what I'm going to tell you. A clean diet. You have to have a clean diet that is consisting of a higher ratio of organic whole fruits and vegetables, as opposed to this excessive meat in the diet. And the sugars, it can wreak havoc. It really can wreak havoc. And of course, proper supplementation of vitamins and minerals and the omega, 3, 6s, and 9 to body weight. But most of all, take that time to be silent and to be still during your waking hours, during the time when you are doing the cheshbon of your midot and of your experiences. Please do yourself a favor. If you are sick and tired of being sick and tired, and you don't know how to get off or turn off this loop, some of these things may help you to do that, but you have to do the work. You have to do the work. Wherever a man wants to go, Shemaim says amen. So if you want to be on this path of, of real healing that will spread out in many ways, it will not just be for your mind, your body will benefit from this as well. You just have to do the work. There is no other, it's not a miracle. You have to just do the work, and Hashem will come in and he will do the rest. So that's it for today. And I hope we'll all be together again soon. B'ezrat Hashem.